Hello and welcome to Shattered Lives, where I'm practically in the dark because we are actually uploading a brand new part of our podcast that we're tacking on because we have a bit of breaking news. So, Mick, you have literally just broke the story, which we kind of figured was going to break, but we were waiting for it to break. And this is that a major gangster that we can only refer to as Mr. Big has been arrested in Dublin.
Yes, we've known about this all day while we were doing the pod earlier, which you will see after this segment because our editor is adding it on. I was talking to you, but I was checking various apps and stuff to see if the confirmation of the arrest had come through. Essentially, it's a man that the media is calling Mr. Big, as you say, Paul. He is, without a doubt, one of the most intelligent and most dangerous and most cunning criminals, not only in modern day Ireland, but in Irish history. I would contend he really is a top tier target for the Gardaí. And, you know, if you speak to any sources who would have knowledge of an organisation, say the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation or the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, if you ever speak to anybody who would have knowledge of those guys, they would have had a grudging acknowledgement that Mr. Big is a very, very intelligent man. More that he's a higher level, much higher level, many steps higher in a grade than the average, what they would call gougers, that Gardaí have to deal with on a daily basis. This man, I called him a criminal mastermind in the piece that's just broken on the Mirror. I don't think that's an understatement.
No, not at all. I mean, God, how many years have we been writing about this man and having to be so legally cautious because, you know, he's been able to stay under the radar despite the fact that he has been connected to so much murder and mayhem over the past couple of decades. Outside of the Kinahans, this particular individual you could probably consider to be one of the biggest, pardon the pun, gangsters in this country. But he's been arrested. Can we try to explain to people he's been arrested under new gangland legislation, effectively?
Yeah, well, it not new, but relatively new, shall we say. I think it's 2006 or 2008. Criminal Justice Act. Now, that gave Gardaí extensive powers. We call it a Section 50 arrest. So this man has been held under Section 50 of the Criminal Justice Act. That allows Gardaí to hold him for a week. So it's a very, very strong piece of legislation. And it's essentially, he is being held on suspicion of what you now would call OCG, Organised Crime Group involvement in the Northeast. Okay. Now, we know yesterday our colleague Nicola Donnelly reported on a glamorous businesswoman and another man who had been connected to a man called Robbie Lawler, who was murdered in Belfast, Etna Drive in Ardoyne in Belfast in April 2020. So those two people would have had a connection to Robbie Lawler. This man was arrested as part of the same investigation as those two people. But I can tell you, this man who was arrested today was not an associate of Robbie Lawler. In fact, he is suspected of organising the murder and carrying out the murder from down here. There has been a long-going Eurojust investigation involving the PSNI and the Gardaí. Listeners may remember last year 12 properties were raided in Dublin and in Sligo, and one of those houses was connected to this Mr. Big fella. So Gardaí and the PSNI have long had the belief, and we wrote about it, that this Mr. Big is responsible for the murder of Robbie Lawler. The reason he murdered Robbie Lawler is he feared Robbie Lawler was going to kill him.
Yeah.
So this has been a long-running investigation, but just to stress, he has not been arrested over the Robbie Lawler murder. He's been arrested for running a gang in the Northeast and in Dublin.
Yeah, you see, when I was referring to, I suppose, new legislation, that's what I thought, that he might be being lifted in relation to the suspicion that he is running an organised criminal gang, which I think is a relatively new charge, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's one they're trying to hit the Kinahans with. Even that file that's gone to the DPP in relation to Daniel Kinahan, Christy Kinahan and Christy Jr. is in part of it anyway, some of it murder charges, but part of it is possibly trying to hit them with that charge of running a criminal organisation.
Yes, I'll just explain that. It is relatively new. It's either 2006 or 2008 that it came in, but Gardaí only really started charging people with it in recent years. There was a couple of lads from Galway who were done with it. They were the first in the state. And there haven't really been that many people charged with this offence because it's a very high bar and it's very, hard to prove, I suppose. But That's what Mr. Big is being held on suspicion of. I'll put it this way: it's a rarely used charge. They have started to increase it in the last couple of years, but this act was written with people like Mr. Big in mind. And the Kennans, you're 100% right. Mr. Big is that level. He really is a major player in Ireland and abroad.
And we can't downplay this moment. I mean, this is huge because, I mean, they have been trying, as you alluded to already, they've been trying to get this guy for years. And it's safe to say that he has evaded Gardaí for a significant amount of time, despite the fact that he and his gang have been linked to at least, you've counted, 16 murders.
16, including Alan Ryan, leader of the real IRA in Dublin. He was shot dead in September 2012. His brother Vinny was shot dead in 2016. Gardaí would believe that Mr. Big colluded with the Kinahan cartel to murder Vinny. He killed Alan Ryan because Alan Ryan was extorting money from criminals, including Mr. Big, and there were various incidents. So Mr. Big killed Alan Ryan because he feared Alan Ryan was going to kill him. Same with Robbie Lawler. When Mr. Big believes he's under threat, he takes no prisoners and he moves. So he's a very, very, I know I've said this a few times, he's a very significant player. We don't know what will happen. Gardaí have not been able to land a knockout punch on him before. There might not be anything from this, but it's significant that he's been arrested. There was, they did try something before, didn't really work. They thought they had him on something, and I can't go into what happened. You know what happened, Paul, but let's just say they didn't land the knockout punch that they wanted to. But I cannot stress how important this man is.
Is it fair to say, I wonder, that the murder of Robbie Lawler, you know, and obviously Robbie Lawler was a highly volatile and dangerous criminal and a hitman in his own right, a serial killer. He was murdered in Belfast. That this really has led to potentially Mr. Big's downfall, because he seems to have gotten himself somewhat directly involved, albeit, and can we talk about this? You know, the suspicion of how involved he was, or suspected to have been involved in that highly organised murder.
Yes, Gardaí in the PSN, I believe he ordered it and was responsible for it. We've spoken about this before, and look, just to stress, he's not under arrest over the Robbie Lawler murder, but this investigation, this arrest, in my mind, is part of the whole wider operation. You'll know this whole EncroChat thing. We've spoken about it before. It was a cracking by French police of this secret communication system that a lot of major criminals had. Mr. Big, from our understanding, is in serious trouble over that. The authorities have messages that they believe show he was involved in the conspiracy to murder Robbie Lawler and the murder of Robbie Lawler. So he's in serious trouble.
And we know his motivation is at least partially down to the well-known horrific murder and dismemberment of Cian Mulready Woods. Now, that was a complicated issue in and of its own right. There were others who had their issues with Robbie Lawler, but certainly there was the belief that Mr. Big sanctioned and facilitated the murder of Robbie Lawler. But also, he had his own beef with Robbie Lawler going back years, when one of his own close friends was murdered, and he effectively blamed him for that.
Oh, he did. It was a guy called Kenneth Finn who was shot dead in the Coolock area of North Dublin in February 2018, and Mr. Big blamed Robbie Lawler for that, and Gardaí blamed Robbie Lawler for that. So the accepted belief, I suppose, in intelligence circles is that Robbie Lawler was behind that murder. So Mr. Big had the personal animus against him for killing a really close associate in Kenneth Finn, but Mr. Big also had the Drogheda link, because he would have been associated with the rivals of Lawler in that Drogheda feud. So Lawler was on one side tangentially, I suppose, and Mr. Big was on the other. So there was that. And then there was also the other aspect that Mr. Big believed Lawler wanted him dead. So he moved against him.
Yeah, I have to say that this Mr. Big fella, of all the gangsters that we have covered, all the criminals that we have covered, he's one of those that really scares me, because you and I know who he is. We know his identity, and it probably doesn't take many internet sleuths to figure out who he is either. But he has managed, despite the amount, and we're talking about a lot of murders connected to him, he has managed to stay out of the Garda's grasp. And that's been quite scary. He's one scary individual. He's managed to run a criminal enterprise, and he is also a successful businessman in his own right.
He's not your average criminal, and Gardaí would grudgingly admit that and accept that. Very, very with it, very intelligent, and very dangerous.
Absolutely. So I think we'll keep an eye on that one, and we'll definitely. I mean, it's obviously breaking news, so we're tacking it onto our podcast here. But we'd be remiss if we didn't, because this is arguably one of the biggest stories of the year. Again, no pun intended. So, do you think that this arrest? I'll just leave it at this. The significance of it. You know, are they trying to nail him here, or do you think that possibly there could be a release without charge, for example?
It's very hard to tell, because at this level, I don't think he's going to make any admissions, right? So, you know, it may have to be, well, we have what we have, and we'll send a file to the Director of Public Prosecutions, as we will mention later on in the pod about other incidents. So my bet is it will probably be a file at DPP, but all I will say is the Robbie Lawler investigation is very live and not even in the background. It's front and centre here. So we should keep an eye on that, how that develops.
Yeah. All right, Mick, thanks for doing this. It's a great story, and yeah, thanks to everybody for listening to us. We have other topics that we want to talk to you about now. We've had an interesting week. We can't talk too much about it, but I've seen an awful lot of each other this week.
Jesus Christ. Interesting. Is that another for traumatizing?
It's a fascinating job that we have. I think we both had the thought this week at certain points, Jesus, what is it that I do for a living? It's certainly not a 9-to-5 job.
I'll say twice in the last fortnight, I've said to myself, what the hell am I doing? I am far too old for this crap. Right? So obviously it was while I was been running from the public order unit at City West when the disturbances were happening last week or the week before. And then you and I went on a job, which all will become clear. But I was down the country, and we spent a couple of days down the country, and there were quite a few interesting moments.
Yeah, well, look, I think we can say to people that, you know, look, as part of this podcast, we've been doing a lot of ideas about doing specials and whatnot. And recently we have filmed a bit of a kind of a documentary style podcast on a really important subject, one of the biggest stories of the year. And as part of that, you and I went down to the country, and we filmed quite a bit of great content over the past couple of days, during which we were brought up through brambles and thick woodland, and we were going up muddy hills. We didn't expect any of that, but all in the name of journalism, eh?
I would advise people, any people who are silly enough to want to become hacks, if you're on a job, always bring extra strong footwear that you can wear for the duration of the job you're on, and then change into nicer shoes when you get back in your car. In other words, bring a pair of crappy boots with you.
Absolutely.
But it was good crack. It was interesting.
It was good crack, but also apart from that, you know, we actually managed to uncover quite a bit of really interesting information, and we're keeping our cards close to our chest because only because we don't know when this is going to come out, but we're very happy with it, and it's great to finally be able to do some high quality kind of podcasts, and that's the joy of doing this kind of medium. We're doing much more than just writing stories now. We're going down and we're actually filming them, so it's been great.
And actually, that's one of the things that you said, and I do listen to you, even though when you do rant at me and you think I'm not listening, I do listen to you. When you said on Wednesday, Jesus, I haven't written at all in 3 days, and we've been working. So we're coming to terms with this wonderful new technology and this wonderful new medium. But it does mean that when you're filming something, you're not typing away. Like I was typing away at 8:10 this morning when I heard one of the stories that we're going to talk about in this pod, and that was just a linear story. Write it, bash it out, get it up online, thanks to our colleagues, as quickly as you can. But what you and I were doing down the country, it was still journalism, still really interesting, but just didn't write anything. So it's a bit weird for old codgers like me to be working on something without typing away.
Yeah, but look, it was fascinating. We can't wait to show you that documentary. Some revelations in it, some interesting facts, and just, you know, it also gave us the opportunity to sit down and really talk through the whole facts of a case, which we rarely get to do. And through that, I mean, we were able to kind of using facts that we have, actually put together certain theories, and it really is going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, so that'll be soon enough.
Shall we talk about some of the stories that happened this week, some of which we obviously missed, we were away, but probably the biggest story of this week is the jailing and downfall of hurling star DJ Carey. And, I wouldn't know much about GAA or hurling, but I certainly know who DJ Carey is, and certainly people of your generation even more so, Michael, not trying to age it, but
No.
DJ Carey, let's just talk about, he was obviously, I would argue, probably the most famous Irish sportsman for a very long period of time, maybe until more recently with, say, the likes of Conor McGregor, Katie Taylor.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And he was very much regarded as a legend, not just within GAA circles. I used to play GAA or GAA when I was a kid, stopped around 18, but you would still be imbued with the whole knowledge of GAA. And I do think DJ Carey was up there with people like Roy Keane on that status. He really was. He was revered, and people would have gone to schools. He would have done prize givings, all that sort of stuff. So there's absolutely no doubt he was a big player in the Irish sports firmament. Not anymore.
No, it's quite the fall from grace. And I've been brushing up, I suppose, a little bit on my knowledge of this case, and I've watched some fascinating coverage of it. There's a local journalist there, Emer Nivrin, who has written a book called The Dodger, DJ Carey and the Great Betrayal. And I've watched some of her interviews in relation to that. And really, she's done fascinating investigative journalism over the years in relation to DJ Carey, the person who he is, the man behind the mask. And I just find it so baffling that someone this famous used people in such a horrible, menacing way, pretending that he had cancer in order to extort large sums of money out of them.
It's beyond belief, really, that someone with such a legendary status would do this. And what I can't understand, and maybe this has been explained in all the Eamon O'Brien's great work and all the other stories that were in the papers and online the last couple of days. Did he think he would get away with it? How did he think he would get away with it? Was it just hubris on his part because he was so famous? He basically thought he could take the piss.
It seems as though he relied on using people who revered him and adored him, and I mean there was one gentleman who was a part of this case, who I read that he was a serious fan of DJ Carey and really looked up to him and respected him, and he was in many ways a star witness in this case because he gave evidence to the fact that he didn't want to take this case against DJ Carey. He was a reluctant witness in that sense. This was someone he adored and didn't want to turn over, but in the end of the day he had been used to such an extent where thousands of euro had been extorted from him, and he was, he was used and abused. And when he learned of others that had also gone through that, he was forced to take action. And this was also one of those things that it wasn't that they went to the Gardaí, many of these victims. It's that the Gardaí came and sought them out, having heard multiple accounts. They realised that this was widespread.
And there was a man. It was quite a really strong interview. I think it was an RT1 Radio 1. I think it was Barry Lenihan interviewed a man who went to court, and I was really struck by he said he was a Catholic, obviously the whole thing about Christian forgiveness, and the whole thing was, for me, you love the sinner but not the sin. And he did say what he did was wrong, but he's human and we're going to stand by him. And that was I'd urge people to listen back to that. Barry did a fantastic job with that interview, but the interviewee, in my mind, really, really was excellent and was a very, very strong interview. But it just struck me. On Friday, he was placed into custody. And just to explain to people, before you're a sentenced prisoner, you can't be sent to, in the CCJ where he was jailed, the committal prison for the CCJ is Mountjoy Prison. So the judge put him into custody on Friday afternoon. Judge Martin Nolan Friday afternoon said, "You're going to jail, mate, but you're going to be sentenced on Monday." So Friday afternoon he was put into custody. He was put into custody in Clover Hill Prison, which is the remand prison in West Dublin. So that's for people who are facing trial or haven't been sentenced. When he was sentenced, we were talking about this on Monday, Paul, I think he probably went to Mountjoy, but won't be there for too long.
No, in fact, I think he may already have been moved. So, he is going to be on sort of an enhanced regime. I also have to think that someone of his kind of fame, it's going to be quite difficult to house somebody like him and to put him with the right kind of prisoners. He may well end up being a target for many. And in other ways, he might be revered and adored by others. But I just think his offence is so reprehensible and it's unusual. I mean, in what kind of person says I have cancer and tries to... I mean, we've heard various different fraud cases, but to have someone actually pretend to be ill, and there's that famous, infamous photograph now of him with the iPhone charger up his fucking nose. Like, I mean, it was so brazen and stupid and really hard to get your head around.
And I was reading a good piece, I think RTE Investigate did a good piece in this. From what I understand, the cancer he claimed to have is incurable. And he basically said that he'd got a cure for it, and it was all about the power of prayer and all that sort of stuff. And there were these faked letters which purported to come from medical experts, and medical experts who spoke to RT said no doctor would write that. It was all, we think you barely want to use you for tests and all that sort of stuff. It was just complete nonsense. But he must have just been in that mindset where he thought he could get away with anything.
But he was smart enough to keep it under the radar to a certain extent. Like, I think there was a friend who said, why don't we do a fundraiser, a more kind of public thing? And he was like, he managed to convince him out of that, because obviously he didn't want the spotlight on him to that degree that he thought the scam might be exposed. I just want to say what the counts were. So there were 10 counts that he pleaded guilty to, and the case involved 13 complainants, including Dennis O'Brien. And O'Brien gave DJ Carey 125 grand and provided him with accommodation and transport. So he also defrauded 22 people in total over the course of this case, DJ Carey, out of almost €400,000 in total. But whatever about Dennis O'Brien, that's obviously, he's a wealthy businessman, but there were other people with far less money who he extorted and used and abused, including that gentleman who came forward, who was one of his biggest fans. And it's just disgusting.
It is. And even people who had no money, did I read that people took money out of their pension pot to help him, that they couldn't give to their own kids, but because they thought he needed it, they gave him the money. Really, really, really reprehensible behaviour. So 5.5 years. What did you think of the sentence? Now, is any of that suspended, by the way?
None of that is suspended.
Yeah,
and I have to say,
that's a good whack.
I was surprised by that particular sentence. I mean, I certainly thought, given he didn't have any previous convictions, and that as much as it's a horrible crime, it was a first-time offence type of thing. And I thought, given his fame as well and the character references and that perhaps, yes, I think he was going to get a custodial sentence, but I thought the judge would go fairly light on him. But 5.5 years is a hefty sentence, especially for someone who's not used to jail, never been to jail before. Like, you can imagine... that is a tough, stiff punishment. Okay, with standard remission, 5.5 years? Maybe he'll be out after 4.
3 and a bit. Maybe 3 and a bit, 4, yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's still a very long time. And as much as, he might, I don't want to say he's going to get special treatment. He's not going to get special treatment, but he's certainly going to be put on a landing in a regime in which his safety is paramount. So I'm sure he will be looked after to a certain extent.
Well, there was an example of that on Friday when we reported that he was sent to Clover Hill. He was by himself. He was basically on protection. He had his own cell. Now, you'll know, Paul, there's serious overcrowding in all Irish prisons. From memory, there's 127% capacity. So it's 27% overcapacity in Clover Hill. And I don't think prison management were overly happy about him getting his own cell. But at the end of the day, they did think that he may be a target, and their professional decision was he needed to be in a cell by himself for his own protection over the weekend until he became a sentenced prisoner, was sent elsewhere.
Right. Well, look, it's a fascinating case, and we wanted to acknowledge it. There's been plenty of fantastic coverage of it over the past couple of days. To be fair, we had our eye off the ball. We were on other things, but there's been some fantastic reporting. Danny Duval did a great colour piece that you can read there on the Mirror in relation to just the downfall of DJ Carey and his career and his life. It's worth reading, and there's great court copy out there as well. Well, we want to talk about other things that happened this week, and there are 2 homicide investigations worth mentioning. Can we talk about the case of Ryan Weir Gibbons? This was a serious assault in Kildare town that happened there on the 26th of October.
It's just so tragic, and a number of times you and I have written about these deaths, these homicides, but Gardaí are classifying it as a murder, which is a one-punch killing. So essentially, Mr. Weir Gibbons He was originally from Mulhuddard in West Dublin, but was living in Kildare town. Everybody knew him as Gibby. Very popular. From what I could see about all the reports about him online, he was very unassuming, very gentle and very decent young man. He was on a bus back home to Kildare, must have been in Dublin or wherever, there was somewhere else. And it seems there was a petty enough dispute between him and a group of late teenagers. And essentially we were told that Mr. Weir Gibbons told this crowd of young kids to quieten down or cop on or stop messing about, something, quite trivial that many people might do. He got off at one stop. The other people got off at another stop, but unfortunately their paths crossed in the McGee Terrace area of Kildare town, which is quite close to the Garda station. There was an incident there. Mr. Weir Gibbons was punched out and he fell to the ground and suffered catastrophic injuries. That was on last Sunday that he suffered those injuries. He was taken to Naas General Hospital, but sadly he died from his injuries last Thursday. On Friday, a post-mortem took place, and as a result of that post-mortem, the case was upgraded to a murder investigation, obviously the most serious investigation there can be. In the meantime, we knew that there was a suspect. That suspect pretty quickly went to the Garda station within seconds or minutes of this happening. His friends were doing CPR on Mr. Weir Gibbons once they realised that he was in a very bad way. I think he also did CPR and then went to the Garda station. Now, his initial version was that he found Mr. Weir Gibbons there. Gardaí very quickly decided that wasn't the case. But they essentially had their man. And on Monday of this week, the man who is a suspect, late teenager, quite a promising sports person, he was arrested on suspicion of murder of Mr. Weir Gibbons.
And this is a tragedy in one sense, isn't it? Because it's not. Look, it's still a horrific crime, but it's not that this was a sustained beating or a stabbing incident. It seems to be, and it may well end up being maybe a manslaughter charge. I don't know. Like, it is a murder investigation, and but in fairness, it seems to be a little more complicated.
Well, look, it's not for us to say what the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, will essentially decide, but I would be surprised if it wasn't a manslaughter charge, or maybe even less, that comes along, during this investigation. Look, the guards know who was involved. They've spoken to several people. They've spoken to the suspect. They've spoken to associates of the suspect. They've seized phones and clothing and all that sort of stuff. So, look, it's now really, a file will be prepared for the Director of Public Prosecutions, who will decide what charges this suspect should face. I think it's inevitable there will be charges, but it's a question of what.
But we think, obviously we're not privy to all the facts of the Garda investigation, but certainly what you've established is this appears to be what we might term a one-punch attack.
Yes, and somebody was even saying it might not even have been a punch to the face or the head. It may have, just been a whack, who knows where. But it was just, the cases like this are all murders and all homicides are horrible, but just one punch deaths. You've covered so many of them, Paul. It just seemed, we're only talking about this. There just seems to be so many of them in the last, maybe 10 years or more, of people falling and hitting their heads.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you, it doesn't take much for a human life to be lost. It's a very sad and tragic case. The other case we wanted to mention is in Tyrrellstown, and this happened over the course of the weekend. A young man by the name of Victor Mamaliga was stabbed to death, and this is a horrific incident.
Yes, and this is sort of a polar opposite to the case of Mr. Weir Gibbons, because obviously a weapon was used, and that shows an intent to cause the death or serious injury, which is what brings it over the threshold for murder. So yes, it appeared there'd been a confrontation between a group of young people in the Tyrrellstown area of Blanchardstown, and then a while later a man was brought to hospital, and that man was Victor Mamaliga. Now unfortunately he had been stabbed, and he had been stabbed in the heart, so he passed away within a few hours. There was a murder investigation launched, obviously, because Mr. Mamaliga was stabbed, and that there was a suspect was arrested at the start of this week. He was held for several hours and was released without charge. So like the case of the Ryan Weir Gibbons murder inquiry, there is now going to be a file being prepared for the Director of Public Prosecutions.
So that's obviously a horrible case. Two murder investigations in the course of just a couple of days. We'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, there's a file going to the DPP in relation to that. Shall we talk about the Puskas, because there's been a bit of a development since last week?
I did say that this was not the last Puska story you would do last week, and it was proved right. Fill us in.
He did. So, look, I had done a story that prison bosses were having a bit of a headache, basically, because of an incident that had happened to Marek Puska, a brother of killer Joseph Puska, the killer of Aisling Murphy. Well, Marek Puska was beaten up in his cell in Mountjoy prison. They had attempted to allow him to mix with a handful of prisoners, and it ended badly. So Marek and Lubomir Puska, just to recap very quickly, are serving 2.5 years in prison for their role in helping to effectively almost cover up their brother's crime by not reporting to Gardaí facts they knew that could have led to his prosecution sooner. And they were also had knowledge of and were involved in getting their wives to burn the clothes that Joseph Puska wore during the course of the murder. Obviously a horrible crime. So they were serving their time in Mountjoy prison there. This incident happened, and they were both isolated in separate cells and locked up for 23 hours a day. The development now is they have been moved. So as of yesterday evening, both brothers were moved from Mountjoy prison to Wheatfield prison in West Dublin. They're now both in Wheatfield, where I'm told they're going to be housed again on probably a similarly restricted regime. It could be still 23 hours a day. The concerns still remain, but they were moved because of the security concerns. There's ongoing concerns for both of their safety. But the other added aspect, and this is something we often talk about, is the overcrowding crisis. And I'm told it's particularly bad at the minute in Mountjoy prison, and they simply just don't have the resources to have two prisoners in separate cells locked up 23 hours a day. They need those cells. So they've had to move them for that reason as well.
And didn't we talk about this last week, that there were 5 people in that 4-person cell and 1 person was sleeping on the floor? And that must be horrendous for any prisoner.
Yeah, I mean, those are the conditions, and so they had to go from that to having them both in separate cells on their own. It just simply wasn't feasible. The other aspect is, look, I mean, can these prisoners, we talked about this last week, can the two Puska brothers really realistically be isolated for the duration of their entire sentence? Or are they going to be able to mix with any kind of the general prison population at all? But I would argue this case, the murder of Aisling Murphy, it angered the entire country, and even within the prison system, these guys are not going to be popular. So yeah, that is going to be a very difficult kind of 2 years for both of those brothers. They'll serve, close to 2 years in prison. But Wheatfield prison, look, I mean, it's also similarly overcrowded. It comes down to, that is currently where they have the space. I don't anticipate that they'll even serve the remainder of their time there. They may be moved again.
And I know you're not saying this, but I don't think anybody will have too much sympathy for them having a difficult time in prison.
No, I mean, to be fair, they absolutely deserve to be punished. It's a horrendous crime. Their brother is the one who committed the murder, but they knew that he had come home with injuries, and he told them that they had harmed, even killed a girl. He told his wife as well, Lucia Stakova, who's serving time in a prison as well, that he had killed a girl. And yet they covered that up. They facilitated his travel to Dublin, and they facilitated the burning of his clothes. It's reprehensible. And whatever about the excuse for their so-called culture, they still got punished, and duly punished for it. Now I know the family are not overly happy. The Murphy family are not overly happy with the sentences. They feel they could be longer, but already they're only 2 weeks in prison, and they're having a pretty tough time of it.
Yeah, as I say, there won't be much sympathy for them.
No. The final story we wanted to talk about is in relation to, and this is really a horrible incident, and you broke quite a bit of it, Mick. This iPass centre up in Drogheda, shocking video footage emerged of it. The moment that somebody doused the staircase in petrol and set fire to it, effectively trying to stop anybody from being able to get out, and setting fire to this building. It's caused a massive reaction. But there's a bit of a twist in it today.
Yeah, so we broke this morning, Thursday morning, that 2 men had been arrested over this. It was a shocking incident. Lots of guards you would speak to would say, really, that person should be done for attempted murder, because when you think about it, there were, several people upstairs. It was the stairs that were doused in petrol. And if anybody wants to see the video, we had it on Sunday on the Mirror website. You can see the whole thing about it goes up in flames. It's not just accidental. That was doused in petrol or some sort of accelerant. So guards you would speak to were saying this to be attempted murder because the people who were upstairs had to be rescued, and I think there were some babies there. How could they get out? The stairs were their only real way of getting out. So, there would be a belief among certain investigators, not necessarily on the team, certain Gardaí, that we're talking about attempted murder charges here. So on Thursday morning, we learned that 2 men had been arrested over this, and then our colleague Nicola Donnelly got the confirmation. And some people may not like this, but as we always say, news is news and facts are facts. The 2 men who are arrested over this and are currently being questioned over this are associates of one of the 2 warring gangs, 2 feuding gangs in Drogheda. They would be heavily associated with the Boylan side of the feud. You'll know, Paul, that 4 people have been murdered as part of this on-running Drogheda feud. All we're saying is those people are gangland criminal associates. Okay, they are associates of the Boylan crime gang, a very, very serious crime gang. I don't know what the motive is. It was a horrendous attack, whatever the motive was, but those 2 people who are arrested are suspected of being involved in gangland activity.
And it's interesting. I mean, obviously, you would think, Occam's razor, the most simple answer is obviously, probably the right answer. But this is a bit complicated. I mean, you would have thought, especially with everything that's been going on at the moment and the fact that it's an IPAS centre, that this was a targeted attack in relation to that anti-asylum seeker sort of kind of movement, the far right, maybe the more extremist side of thinking. But if there is a gangland connection here, it's a bit more complicated. We are probably legally limited in what we can say, but there are reasons in which gangsters may have wanted to carry out an attack in that area, but it's just the timing of it is interesting. I still wonder whether there is another aspect to this.
Yes, and the way we put it on Monday's paper on the Mirror website was Gardaí may be investigating a possible grudge against someone who was formerly connected to that building. But we don't know, and we don't know the mindsets of the people who were involved in that. We don't know the mindsets of whoever did that, why they did it. We just don't. But we do know that the people who are arrested are suspected of being involved in the Boylan gang or associates of the Boylan gang. So look, it is what it is. They're the facts.
Well, no matter what the motivation was, it's a horrendous attack, and it could have ended up in lives being lost and children's lives potentially being lost. And so you have to look at that as a potential attempted murder charge.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what people are telling us. I know people were talking to you about it, and the people talking to me, and lots of people would say, attempted murder, endangerment, very serious offences, not just arson. So look, they're in custody as of Thursday afternoon, and we'll have to see how that develops.
We will. We'll leave it there for this week, Mick.
Yes, I just want to apologise to people. We're having a new recording system, and it's in HD, so I'm very sorry.
You'll have to see all of our pores, and we're still getting used to all this technology stuff. Listen, thanks everybody for listening to us. You might see our special next week. It could be the week after that, but we'll still be talking to you at some point over the coming days. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.